Hello, this is Mr. Jarrett, and this is a first attempt at trying to explain how to do 15-mark questions at a 2 Government and Politics from Edexcel. This is specifically Unit 4C, and I'm going to choose as an example the question: explain the advantages and disadvantages of the process of amending the Constitution. It's a good question because it's towards the beginning of the course, one of the first questions you can come across, so really good for a good example as to how to answer these kind of questions. So that's the question which we're going to look at. First, you have a quick look at the mark scheme for 15 markers, and this is a screen grab of the actual mark scheme itself. And what you'll see, I put up the threshold level. Basically, this is the mark that an examiner is going to be looking at when they're trying to decide what mark to give it. So you've got threshold level 2, so before you get to, so between level 1 and level 2, the examiner is going to be looking at and going, okay, do I think your knowledge is limited? Is it very limited, or has it got some satisfactory element to it? But what you're looking for is at least one significant factor of the question, or one of each of 2 factors. Essentially, what that essentially means is that in this kind of question is an explanation of one advantage and one disadvantage, or if it's a question which only has a one direction, as it were, do I think there's enough detail in there to get to level 2? We're not really interested in level 2, actually more interested in level 3. So level 2, for example, is between 6 and 10 marks depending on the actual level of detail. Level 3 is between 11 and 15 marks. It's entirely possible to get 15 marks and 15 markers. As an examiner, I've marked questions where I've given them 15 marks. I'm quite happy with that. So in Unit 4C, similar thing, you can certainly get 15 marks by doing a very good essay, but to get to level 3, which is at 11 marks, you've got to get threshold level 3. Responsible generally exhibit the following features: clear understanding, start with there, of the topic in the question, clear explanation of at least 2 significant factors related to the topic in the question, or most importantly 2 of each of 2 factors. So in this example, the advantages and disadvantages of the process of amending the Constitution, you're looking at, okay, do I have 2 advantages and 2 disadvantages in that essay, which I can illustrate. And a conclusion or with judgment irrelevant. Now, this particular essay doesn't really require a judgment as such. It isn't asking you to come to a conclusion as to which is best. It's just asking you to identify the advantages and disadvantages. However, some questions may ask for a conclusion because they're asking for a judgment. So this particular question does not have that. You do not therefore have to have a conclusion. However, the thing I want to really emphasize is the fact that you have to have each of 2 factors. So you have to have 2 advantages and 2 disadvantages at least, just to get to 11 marks. If you want to get to 15 marks, or even to 13, you're looking at between 3 or 4 in each. Okay, so 3 or 4 in each, and the idea is to really convince the examiner that your knowledge is full and detailed and sophisticated. Okay, that's the question. That's the word they've used there in the mark scheme. It's sophisticated construction of coherent arguments, making good use of appropriate vocabulary, with good or better ability to analyze and explain. So, are you able to explain why the feature helps to be an advantage or disadvantage in this particular example essay title? Okay, that's the mark scheme. How does it work in practice? Well, essentially the way I always figure it, you have a brief introduction explaining in brief the processes in this particular essay of amending the Constitution. Now, so this is talking about the different kinds of amendment process, the exact proportion of support you need in Congress, and then from the state legislatures and things like that. That's the kind of detail that you need. So obviously you talk about 2/3 and 3/4 and all that kind of stuff. Make sure that details in the introduction. What you then need is a paragraph, and it's 1 paragraph on advantages, in which you have 3 factors at least, and you explain why they're important, and you clearly link that back to the question. It's not a matter of info dumping. Here's everything I remember about the Constitution. That won't get you very many marks at all, but it's explaining why each of these gets becomes an advantage. Then you have a paragraph on disadvantage, identifying these three factors again and explaining again why they are important and linking that to the question. It's not a matter of info dumping again. So at least three factors gets us into level 3, probably sort of mid level 3. I'm happy to give full marks if I think it's overwhelming detail. Conclusion in this particular essay, not really relevant, not really needed, and a 15 mark, and that's something the board have said, but a brief judgment at the end if necessary or if time allows. This is significant. Obviously in an hour and a half paper you've got to make sure you do 3 15 markers and have enough time to do the 45 marker. So a conclusion in this particular essay is not necessary, although like I said, occasionally some questions it's important, so I need to have a brief judgment. Okay, so that's how it works in theory. Let's look at a paragraph in practice of this particular essay, and this is one the board has provided for this particular question, and I've just taken a paragraph out of the model answer from this candidate, and it's a good paragraph. It does an awful lot really well, and what I'm trying to point out is where the features in the amendment process are identified, and where the analysis or explanation of these features is, and how many of each. So I think so if you look at the answer, it starts off well. The difficulty of amendment is a protection for both citizens and states. If the amendment process was easier or required less state agreement, it would allow federal government to expand its own powers at citizens and states' expense with ineffective checks on its power, etc., etc. Now, it's a very good essay. It certainly gets in level 3. Personally, just looking at this kind of paragraph, I'd be a bit wary of giving it full marks. I don't think it quite has the overwhelming detail that a full marker needs. However, if the rest of the essay was overwhelmingly detailed and really specific and really focused, I may be tempted to give it 14 or 15, depending exactly on how much on what the rest of the answer is like. Looking at the model answer, the rest of the model answer, it is pretty good really. So this certainly gets into good level 3. I suspect it's about 13. 15 marks, I'd want really more details. So having a look at this, I've prepared already a sort of an overlay, and I'm going to bring that down here to show you the kind of how this essay is organised. It's really quite effective actually. The candidate has done essentially one sentence identifying the feature, and then what they've done is this candidate has put down explanation or analysis of the feature just after that. It's really effective, and there are clearly 3 of features and 3 bits of analysis in there, so that certainly gets into a good level 3. Obviously, if there's a little bit more, then you might even get to 15 marks. So that's what this candidate does. This paragraph here is the advantage. Is the disadvantage, and then we have the other paragraph, which is the other side, and then you have 2 of those, and then that is a complete paragraph. The introduction, incidentally, is very detailed, all about the amendment process, and that shows the candidate really knows their stuff. So that's a very good paragraph, a good example of how to write 15 mark questions in the exam. It's not overly complicated. There's no waffle. It really nails the argument. Personally, I'd like to see a little more detail in this, but I think it's pretty good. Okay, thanks a lot. Thanks for listening.